Hello, this is the last video reflection for this series covering the conference, World of Tomorrow conference in Islamabad in Pakistan, which I attended last weekend. I'm kind of journaling my thoughts and reflections on the ideas, themes, and content that came out of the conference. I might continue this series with other reflections, maybe covering the themes and content covered in my podcast, It's an Artful Life, which you can check out on SoundCloud and YouTube. But in the meantime, I have one more of these to do. So this one, I want to talk about a couple of things of sustainability and individual responsibility, which I think is kind of a good way to wrap up this series. So something that came up in one of the panels was this idea that sustainability is an elitist concept. And they were talking about fashion in particular and how the freedom to make sustainable choices in fashion, such as non-leather, non-animal product fashion choices and veganism and all that it requires a certain level of income and elitism to be able to make that choice. And I just found that to be a really interesting concept. The kind of global elite tends to take its globalism for granted. And for example, I definitely take my ability to move around the world for granted and my ability to learn about different cultures. And it's easy to forget that it is an elite way of living in many ways, and that, especially when you think about what's going on, for example, in the States right now, there's kind of, or around the world, there's kind of a class of liberal elites that very much look down on the idea of not traveling, shall we say. People who stay in their own towns, and they kind of are seen as purposefully ignorant and lost. And I think that we need to be careful about this idea. There's a huge polarization between the people who embrace globalization and the people who push away globalization. And it's one of the greatest challenges of our time. And I think that often those who embrace globalization take the understanding of the global world and their ability to embrace it for granted, and don't take the time to understand why the other side might think the way they do. But I think it also goes both ways. So I'm not going to say that any one group is at fault here. I just happen to be part of that sort of liberal elite, so I am looking at it from that perspective. Something that came up during that same panel, which I thought was interesting. Often when we talk about the future, and I've talked about this in my first video reflection, it's very general. The terms are very general. We talk about we talk about society, we talk about countries, we talk about big, wide concepts. But we don't live in terms of big concepts. We live individually. Each of us lives in here. In our own minds, we see the world through our own eyes. And it's essentially, we can talk all we want, but the real question kind of is, what are you, me, going to do about it? And it was kind of this idea, like, what future do you want to make? And then you have to live in it in some ways. You have to kind of take individual responsibility for your own future, and it's a tough concept, because then you say, well, how can I live when somebody is stopping me to do? And that's legitimate, but at the end of the day, you can't live the future for anybody but yourself, right? And, something that one of the people on this fashion panel was saying that, if you want to build a sustainable future, you have to start by making sustainable choices for your own life. You can decide, what am I going to put on my body today? Is it going to be a sustainable outfit or not? And you can make that choice. There's another question about individual responsibility that I want to bring up here. I don't have an answer for it, but I thought it was really interesting. There's kind of there's so much information available in the world right now. Everything is available. It's at our fingertips, on Google. And one person was basically talking about the fact that we don't really need teachers anymore because we have Google. And that you have the information there, so you have a responsibility to look it up. And I was thinking about this in terms of actually being a U.S. citizen right now, and how difficult it is to actually be informed. Like, I can look at what's on my Facebook and I probably won't be informed. In order to be truly informed, I do have the information. It is there. I have to go look for it. And so the question is, just because the information is there, am I responsible to know it? I don't have answers for this. In the past, the information was there. It was just in books, right? So it was a little harder to find, but it was there. And so do you have a responsibility to know it because it was there? Just because Google is easy to access and the information is all very present, do we have responsibility to know all that information simply because it's accessible? I'm not sure. And in terms of that comment about, do we need teachers anymore? My God, the internet is a search engine. You can find whatever you want, but it's not necessarily going to teach you anything. It will give you a lot of information, but information and knowledge are not the same thing. And knowledge is something that can be passed on through teachers. Information is something you can pick up. And so maybe that's kind of where this leads, is that, we have all this information, it's available, but we don't have knowledge, and we've kind of confused the two. This idea of individual responsibility and creating the kind of future that you want to live in is something that I do practice as well. I call it crafting inevitability, and it's something that I've been working on for a while in terms of my dance career. And I think that it's quite underrated, this idea that you can actually choose the future you want to live in, through the way that you live your life. It's very easy to look around and see all the problems waiting for you and to be able to point out the problems. It's what happened a lot in this conference, actually. A lot of people were saying, this is a problem, this is a problem, this one is a problem. But at the end of the day, pointing out the problems is not going to change anything. All of us have to live in the moment in which we're in. I am living right now speaking to this camera, right? Tomorrow, even tonight, I have to decide the way I want to live, the way I want to speak. The tomorrow, literally tomorrow, that I want to wake up to. And obviously I don't have control over the world because I'm just one person. But I do have control over this one person. And I think that there is a certain amount of his individual responsibility that we all have to kind of buy into, and saying it's not about what everyone else is doing, It is, but it's also what I'm doing. And when you think about sustainable choices, you know, it has to start with a choice, and a choice happens in a person. So I mean, it's a complicated topic, and I don't think there are any easy answers, but these are just kind of some thoughts that I have. You know, please comment, ask me questions. I'd be happy to kind of continue this discussion. It's, as I said, it's very complex, but I think it's worth having. So yeah, those are the topics that I wanted to cover in this reflection. So we're gonna pull this to a close, but thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed, you know, do the usual YouTube things like and comment, subscribe, blah 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 blah. And keep in touch for possible future reflections. Thank you.